My brother laughed right in my face. Elena, your old car and your struggles have no place at my luxury wedding. He insisted on being surrounded only by success. Well, he got exactly what he asked for. You should have heard the dead silence on the line when the planner, stuttering with panic, told him why his booking was suddenly cancelled. Lucas, the owner of this entire resort chain who just personally shut down your wedding, is your sister. The call came on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my downtown Seattle office. I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. Hello, is this Elena Vance? The woman's voice was professional but laced with discomfort. I confirmed my identity, and she introduced herself as Chloe Evans from Gilded Lily Planning, the coordinator for my brother Lucas's wedding at the Asher Cliffside Resort. I set down my coffee. Lucas hadn't spoken to me in months, not since our last family dinner where he'd made it clear I wasn't welcome. Well, this is rather awkward, Chloe continued, but I received a call from your parents this morning. They've asked me to remove you from the guest list entirely. They said, quote, she's not family anymore and isn't needed at this celebration. I leaned back in my leather chair, gazing out at the grey city skyline. I told her I understood, asking only if she was happy with the venue. She gushed about the Asher Cliffside, calling it world-class and noting how fortunate they were to secure a date. That's wonderful to hear, I said calmly, asking for 10 minutes to handle a work matter before hanging up. I immediately dialed my assistant. Justine, connect me with Simon Hayes at the Asher Cliffside immediately. Within 2 minutes, Simon, the general manager of my flagship property, was on the line. Elena, I got your message about reviewing the event for this weekend. How would you like me to handle this? I didn't hesitate. Simon, call the wedding planner, Chloe Evans, and inform her that due to a scheduling conflict, the resort needs to cancel the Vance wedding. Full refund of all deposits. Explain that we've had a last-minute corporate buyout that requires the entire facility. When he asked about alternative dates, I instructed him to make it clear we could not accommodate any future bookings for this client at any of our 7 locations along the coast. And Simon, I added, mentioned that this decision came directly from the chain's owner. Exactly 8 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Chloe again, her voice strained with panic. Miss Vance, I just received a devastating call from the resort. They're canceling the wedding. Complete cancellation. They said a corporate event requires the entire facility. She sounded on the verge of tears, noting she had 200 guests and no venue for Saturday. The general manager said the decision came directly from the chain's owner. No alternative dates, nothing. She paused, then asked tentatively, wait, did you say your last name was Vance? Like the wedding? Do you happen to know anyone connected to this resort chain? I smiled at the framed photo on my desk from the acquisition ceremony 3 years ago. Chloe, the corporate buyout they mentioned? That would be my company. I am the owner of the entire Asher resort chain. The line went silent. You own the resort? She whispered. Yes, I acquired all 7 properties through my private equity firm 3 years ago. She stammered that my family had described me as struggling and unrealistic. I laughed dryly and asked her to conference my brother into the call. When Lucas joined, he was immediately hostile. Chloe, I thought we made it clear Elena isn't involved. We don't need her drama. I cut in calmly, agreeing that drama should be avoided. Chloe tried to explain the venue crisis, but Lucas demanded she simply find another high-end location, insisting money was no object. Lucas, I interjected, when you booked the Asher Cliffside, did you research who owns it? He scoffed, dismissing it as some faceless corporation. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper when she dropped the bomb. Lucas, your sister owns the resort chain. Lucas laughed it off, listing my tiny apartment and old car as proof of my failure. Lucas, I said gently, I live in a penthouse and take private cars. The vehicle you see is for errands. I had Chloe read the cancellation notice again, emphasizing the owner's decision. I own the entire Azure portfolio, I told him. I acquired it in 2021. To prove it, we conferenced in Simon Hayes, the general manager, who confirmed professionally that Miss Elena Vance is the sole owner of all Azure properties, and mentioned the acquisition cost was over $200 million. The silence on the line was heavy. Lucas finally spoke, his voice trembling. How? Mom and Dad said you were struggling. I explained that I had simply stopped sharing my successes because they were always dismissed. Chloe asked if she should leave, but I stopped her. How quickly could you find an alternative venue? She admitted it was impossible. What if I told you I could guarantee a venue even more exclusive? I offered my private estate on Catalina Island, a 40-acre compound with a helipad and luxury facilities. Lucas was stunned. Why would you do this after everything? Because you're still my brother, I said. There is just one condition, I'd like to be invited to the wedding. Lucas agreed instantly, his voice breaking with regret. 3 days later, I stood on the deck of my private island resort as the sun set over the Pacific. The venue was magical, strung with thousands of lights. My parents had been quiet since arriving via the helicopter transport I'd arranged, overwhelmed by the luxury. During the reception, my father approached me, bewildered by the cost. It's handled, Dad, I assured him. Later, my mother apologized for the invitation debacle, admitting they had made terrible assumptions. The next morning at brunch, the truth finally came out. I told them plainly, I didn't arrange this to prove a point, but because I love this family. When pressed about my work, I revealed the full extent of my success, the resort chain, the tech holdings, a net worth of $400 million. My father stared, realizing they had pitted a daughter who had actually built an empire. We failed you, my mother wept. You didn't fail me, I said, we just had different definitions of success. I offered to use my resources to help my father's struggling accounting firm and fund my mother's nonprofit. Overwhelmed, they asked how they could ever make it right. By starting fresh, I told them. By being a family that lifts each other up. As they flew back to the mainland, Lucas texted me, "Thank you for being the sister we didn't deserve, but got anyway." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you for being my family, always." I smiled at a framed photo on my desk, taken during the ribbon-cutting ceremony when I had acquired the Azure collection 3 years ago. "Chloe," I said, deciding to end the charade, "can I share something with you?" The corporate buyout the resort mentioned, that would be my company. I am the owner of the entire Azure resort chain. The line went completely silent for nearly 10 seconds. "You own the resort chain?" she finally whispered. "All 7 properties in the region?" I confirmed that I had acquired them through my hospitality investment firm 3 years prior. Chloe struggled to reconcile this with what she had been told. "But your family, they said you weren't family anymore. They made it sound like you were struggling, like you had unrealistic dreams and were finally learning your limitations." I laughed, though not unkindly. "Chloe, could you confidence in my brother? I think there's been a miscommunication in my family that needs clearing up." She hesitated, noting how personal this was, but I insisted it was the best way to handle the crisis. A few minutes later, Lucas's voice joined the call, sharp and impatient. "Chloe, what's going on? Please tell me you found a solution for the venue." When I announced my presence, his tone turned instantly cold. Chloe, I thought we made it clear that Elena isn't involved. We don't need her trying to insert herself into our celebration. I replied calmly that I was just there to ensure Chloe handled the guest list change professionally. Good, Lucas snapped. We don't need any drama or attention-seeking behavior at my wedding. Chloe tried to pivot to the cancellation, but Lucas cut her off. I don't care what it costs, Chloe. Find us another high-end location. Money isn't an object, this is my wedding to Victoria, and it needs to be perfect. I interjected before she could answer. Lucas, when you booked the Azure Cliffside, did you research who owns it? He scoffed. What does that matter? It's some big corporation. The point is, it's exclusive and reflects well on our status. Chloe's voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. Lucas, your sister owns the resort chain. The line went silent again before Lucas laughed in disbelief. That's impossible. Elena works some basic office job. She lives in a tiny apartment and drives a 10-year-old car. I corrected him gently. I live in the Meridian penthouse downtown. I take a car service for work. The old sedan is just for weekend errands. He accused me of making things up for attention, so I asked Chloe to read the cancellation notice verbatim. She read the note about the chain owner borrowing the wedding from all 7 regional locations. Lucas paused, his voice changing. 7 locations? I listed them, including the Azure Palms where Victoria held her bridal shower and the marina where the rehearsal was booked. I own the entire chain, I explained. I acquired them in 2021 through Vance Global Holdings. Chloe realized the implication immediately. So when the general manager said the owner made this decision personally. That was me, I said. After you called to say I wasn't family anymore, I decided to respect that decision by not hosting family events at my properties. Lucas's voice lost its arrogance, replaced by shock, but he still demanded proof. If you own this chain, prove it. Chloe, call the general manager back. We conferenced Simon Hayes into the call. Chloe explained there was confusion about the ownership. Simon answered with professional finality, there is no confusion on our end. Miss Elena Vance is the sole owner of all Azure Collection properties. She acquired our chain in 2021. No confusion on our end, Simon stated professionally. Miss Elena Vance is the sole owner of all Azure Collection properties. She acquired the chain in 2021 and has been an exceptional leader. When Lucas, his voice barely audible, asked how much the results cost, Simon hesitated before admitting that while he couldn't discuss specific financials, the acquisition was valued at over $200 million. The line went silent, save for the sound of my brother's heavy breathing. Simon confirmed that per my instructions, a full refund was being processed immediately. Lucas, I said gently, breaking the trance, are you still there? He stammered, unable to reconcile the reality. I don't understand. How do you own a $200 million chain? Mom and Dad said you were struggling. I explained that I had been building my investment portfolio since college, starting small and leveraging up, but I had stopped sharing my success because the family always dismissed it or pivoted to someone else's achievements. Chloe tentatively asked if she should leave us to talk, but I stopped her. How quickly could you find an alternative venue? I asked. When she admitted it was impossible with 5 days' notice, I played my hand. What if I told you I could guarantee a venue even more exclusive? Lucas snapped at me, accusing me of playing games, but I ignored his defensiveness. Chloe, there is an 8th Azure property not open to the public. My private estate on Catalina Island. 40 acres, private beach, helipad, and luxury facilities for 300. Chloe gasped, but Lucas sounded strained. Why would you do this? After everything we said. Because you're still my brother, I replied, and Victoria deserves a beautiful wedding. I propose they use the estate with all expenses covered, luxury service, helicopter transport, everything. There is just one condition, I added. Lucas was wary, but when I said, I'd like to be invited to my brother's wedding, the silence stretched for 15 seconds before he whispered, Of course. Of course you're invited. We coordinated the logistics, instructing Simon to arrange the airlift, and then the others dropped off the line. Elena, Lucas said quietly, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. We treated you terribly. We thought you were struggling to pay rent. I admitted I had let them believe that to avoid the constant minimization of my work. When he asked how successful I really was, I looked around my office at the evidence of my life's work. My net worth is around 400 million, Lucas. The results are just one part of the portfolio. He was stunned, admitting they thought I was just a dreamer who hadn't figured out real life. I figured it out, I said, just differently than you expected. After a long pause, he addressed the elephant in the room. The wedding invitation. Elena, that wasn't my idea. Mom and Dad convinced me you'd create drama, Lucas admitted, his voice thick with regret. They said you'd make the day about yourself. I asked him when I had ever done that, and the silence that followed was answer enough. He acknowledged that my habit of sitting quietly in the background had been misinterpreted as failure rather than discretion. When he asked if we could start over, I agreed, but with conditions, no more assumptions, and my successes had to be treated with the same enthusiasm as everyone else's. He agreed instantly. When he tried to refuse the island venue as too generous, I reminded him that despite everything, we were family. I insisted we keep the truth about my finances secret until after the ceremony. I didn't want our parents' defensive embarrassment to overshadow the celebration. You're right, he sighed. You always were the smart one. 3 days later, the sun set over my private estate on Catalina Island, illuminating thousands of fairy lights strung between the palms. The setup was breathtaking, bringing Victoria to tears, while my parents walked around in a daze, overwhelmed by the exclusivity. I deflected their questions with vague mentions of connections. The ceremony was flawless, and as Lucas and Victoria exchanged rings against the backdrop of the Pacific, I felt a genuine surge of happiness. During the reception, my father cornered me at the bar, panic in his eyes. This must cost more than most houses, Elena. Only billionaires can afford this. I sipped my champagne and told him it was handled, refusing to discuss numbers. Later, on the dance floor, my mother pulled me aside to apologize for the invitation debacle, admitting they had been wrong to exclude me based on false assumptions. We can talk tomorrow, I assured her, watching the family celebrate under the stars. Tonight is about Lucas and Victoria. The next morning, we gathered for brunch on the terrace, the ocean breeze mixing with the scent of coffee, the air relaxed but heavy with the anticipation of the truth finally coming to light. So, my father said, the clink of his coffee cup against the saucer sounding loud in the morning air. I think it is time for some honest conversation. Lucas exchanged a glance with Victoria before speaking carefully. Dad, there are things about Elena we need to discuss. Specifically, how she managed to arrange all of this luxury. I took a steadying breath. Before anyone says anything, I want to be clear. I didn't arrange this celebration to prove a point or make anyone feel small. I did it because I love this family, despite our communication problems. My mother raised an eyebrow. Communication problems? Mom, I asked gently, when was the last time you asked me about my work? Really asked, not just polite filler? She faltered. I suppose I assumed if something important was happening, you would tell us. I tried, I said. But every time I shared good news, the conversation was redirected, or I was told to be realistic. My father frowned. That is not true. We have always been supportive. Dad, 2 months ago I tried to tell you about a major acquisition. You told me to focus on getting a stable job with benefits instead of chasing dreams. Victoria spoke up quietly. What kind of acquisition, Elena? I looked around the table at the people I love despite their flaws. I bought a luxury resort chain for $200 million. The silence was absolute. 200 million, my mother whispered. The Azure collection. Including the hotel where you originally booked the wedding. Lucas leaned forward. Elena, tell them the rest. I own the resort we are sitting on right now, I said. This is my private island. My father's hand shook. Your private island? Along with what else? Real estate, technology, diversified holdings. My total net worth is approximately 400 million. My mother stared at me, her face pale. And we told people you were struggling. We excluded you because we thought you were unsuccessful. I know, I said softly. My father's voice was barely audible. How long? I have been building my portfolio for 8 years. The major growth happened in the last 4. 8 years, he repeated. And we never knew. Because every time I tried to share it, I was dismissed. Victoria reached across the table to take my hand. This explains the quiet confidence I never understood. My mother was weeping now. We failed you so completely. You didn't fail me, Mom. We just had different definitions of success. Lucas's voice was thick with emotion. We excluded you from your own brother's wedding because we thought you were an embarrassment. Instead, you are the most successful person in our bloodline. Success isn't just money, I said. You have all built families and careers. Those are successes too. But 400 million, my father stammered. That is generational wealth. It is. And I intend to use it to support family. Dad, your accounting firm has been struggling, hasn't it? He nodded slowly. What if I connected you with mid-sized businesses that need exactly your kind of personalized service? I turned to my mother. Mom, your literacy nonprofit. What if funding wasn't an issue? What if you had the resources to implement every program you dreamed of? Elena, my mother said, eyes wide. You can't just solve our problems with money. I am not solving them. I am offering resources so you can solve them yourselves. Lucas shook his head in amazement. You are changing our entire family's trajectory. But we do not deserve this, my father said firmly. We treated you terribly. Deserve is a complicated word, Dad. Do any of us really deserve our luck? Or do we just try to be grateful and use our opportunities responsibly? Victoria wiped away tears. You are incredible.